Hello and welcome to Coiled. Today I'm going to walk through the Coiled Quickstart and show you a few easy steps for you to be able to work with Coiled on your laptop and scale up your Dask workloads to the cloud. So we'll be walking through a few steps. First we'll install Coiled and Dask on our laptop, then we'll create a cluster and connect to it in the cloud, and then we'll work with Dask as usual. So let's get started. So the first thing that we're going to do is to make sure that you have Dask and Coiled installed on your local machine. You can do this with pip or with Conda, and you can also sign up for a free Coiled account on Coiled Cloud. You can sign in with GitHub, Google, or email and password. So I'll sign in here, and here I'll see my Coiled dashboard where you can see different things like the clusters you've created, number of workers, and their cost. So we'll come back to that in a second. So next up, we're going to create a Dask cluster and connect to it. So let's go ahead and run that cell. And what's happening here, if you're doing this for the first time, you'll want to get your Coiled token. You can get that from your Coiled dashboard in the quick start steps here. So I'll copy that over, paste that in, and we'll save that for next time. So let's look through the code here. We've imported Coiled, we asked for a Coiled cluster and gave it a name and asked for 10 workers. So right now, if I go over to the Coiled dashboard, Coiled is provisioning a Dask cluster for me. It'll be up and running in about a minute. So here I can see the cluster name, how many workers are associated with it. It's using our default software environment. And then here you can see the current cost and the total cost as the cluster runs. So we'll give that a minute to provision all of the workers, and we'll come back to this in a minute and then look at the Dask dashboard and then run some Dask computations. All right, great. After about a minute, it looks like our cluster is up and running. And if I switch over to the cluster dashboard, I can see that all of my workers are just about coming up and ready to receive work. So I'll go back over to the notebook, and one thing I'll notice is there's a link here to the Dask dashboard for the cluster. So here in a moment, we'll see different tasks being run on the cluster. I can also see things like the 10 workers that are part of this cluster and what their CPU memory usage is like, among other things. So we created a Coiled cluster, we pointed Dask to use that cluster for any Dask computations, and now we're ready to work with Dask as usual. So I'm going to run this cell, and this is going to use a Dask data frame to read some data from S3, and then persist that data in memory across the cluster, and then we'll do a group by calculation to figure out what the average tip amount is out of this data set based on the number of passengers riding in a taxi. So while this computation is running, I can flip over to the Dask dashboard, and I can see different tasks running across different threads across the entire cluster. So it looks like it's reading in the data across the cluster right now, and it's progressing through the computations I've asked it to do. While this is running, on the remote cluster, after it's done, I'll get the results back in my notebook, and I can either continue working and doing large computations on the cluster, or I can terminate the cluster and move on with my analysis. So it looks like the computation's finished, and if I can see the results here. This is the average tip amount by number of passenger in the taxi, and so my computation is done. So there's a few things to note. Coiled and Dask make it really easy to work from your local environment. This could be on your laptop. This could also be a development environment in the cloud. And it's pretty seamless to just be able to create a cluster with a couple of lines, connect to it, and then do what I would normally do in Dask. So Coiled's taking care of all the remote provisioning and DevOps that's necessary to stand up a cluster, network it together, and essentially make that ready to receive tasks from Dask. So with that, feel free to create your own account in Coiled Cloud, check out our documentation, and walk through the quick start yourself. And then in the future, we'll cover other topics like data access and being able to use different Dask interfaces like data frames or arrays or even custom code with delayed. So thanks, hope you found that useful, and look forward to having you try things out yourself.